I've always believed life doesn't give you anything you can't handle, but it sure does like to test your limits. That's what I was thinking as I packed up the last of my boxes in the small, sunlit apartment I'd called home for nearly a decade. You're really doing it, huh, Emma? Big city, big job? My neighbor, Joe, asked as he leaned against my open door, sipping from a can of beer. Yeah, Joe. It's finally happening, I replied, taping up another box. Can't say I'm not a bit nervous, though. You'll do fine. You're tough as nails, Joe chuckled, his voice gruff with years of smoking and late-night drinks. Just don't forget us little people when you're climbing that corporate ladder. I smiled, wiping my hands on my jeans. I could never forget you, Joe. You know too many of my secrets. We both laughed, the sound echoing in the now empty room. It felt strange to leave this place. It wasn't just the apartment, but everything it represented, my struggles, my wins, and the endless nights of studying while working 2 jobs to keep the lights on. After Joe left, I made one last call to the one person who mattered most. Hey, Mom, it's me. Just wanted to check in before I hit the road. Emma, darling, are you all packed? Did you eat something? My mother's voice was always filled with concern. Yeah, Mom, all packed. And I grabbed a sandwich, don't worry. Oh, good. I wish I could be there to help. Are you sure this is what you want, Emma? It's such a big change. I knew this move scared her. Since it had always been just the 2 of us, any change felt monumental. It's a great opportunity, Mom. I can't pass it up. I promise I'll visit soon, okay? There was a pause, the line crackling slightly. I know, honey. I'm proud of you. Just, be careful, okay? Hanging up, I took a deep breath, looking around the bare room once more. It wasn't just a new job. This was a fresh start, a chance to prove myself, and maybe, just maybe, make my mom proud. Driving to the new city was a blur of highway lines and radio static. When I arrived, the new branch office was imposing, all sleek glass and sharp angles, so different from the cozy, cluttered spaces I was used to. On my first day, nerves jittery and palms sweaty, I pushed through the revolving doors and into the lobby. I must have looked lost because a guy in a neatly pressed suit stopped in front of me, a friendly smile on his face. You must be Emma. I'm Mark, I'll be helping you get settled in, he said, extending his hand. Taking it, I was surprised by his firm grip. Thanks, I appreciate it. It's a bit overwhelming. Stick with me, and you'll be fine, Mark assured me with a nod. Let's start by introducing you to the team and then I'll show you your new office. As we walked through the corridors, his easy manner helped calm my nerves. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad. Maybe I could really make this work. First rule of the game here, Mark said as we approached a set of large double doors. Never let them see you sweat. I laughed, more at ease than I'd been all morning. Got it. No sweating. Exactly. You'll fit right in. Settling into the new job and city was like learning to dance to a completely new rhythm. The work was tougher, the stakes higher, and the pace relentless. But Mark was there every step of the way, showing me the ropes without making me feel like a total noob. Okay, so everyone uses this software here. It's not rocket science, but it might as well be if you've never seen it before, Mark explained as we sat in my new, stark office. He leaned over my desk, his fingers flying over the keyboard to demonstrate. I've used something similar in my last job, I said, trying to keep up. Good, you're not starting from scratch then, Mark said with a grin. You'll catch on quick. You always do. It wasn't just his knowledge that helped, it was his attitude. He didn't patronize or hover. Instead, he was straightforward and, to my relief, had a sense of humor that made the long hours easier. Hey, Emma, how about we grab a coffee? You look like you need a caffeine hit, Mark suggested one particularly grueling afternoon. I was born needing a caffeine hit, I quipped, standing to stretch my legs. At the coffee shop, the casual setting helped us step away from our roles at work. Mark shared stories about growing up in the city, and I found myself opening up about my small-town life and all the quirks that came with it. The more time we spent together, both in and out of work, the more I appreciated his company. He was easy to be around, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I could be myself. One evening after work, as we walked back to the office from a nearby diner, Mark stopped and looked at me seriously. "Emma, I've been thinking. We're great partners at work, right?" "Right," I nodded, wondering where this was going. "So, what if we think about making this a regular thing? Like, not just as colleagues or coffee buddies?" he asked, scratching the back of his neck nervously. "You mean, like, a date?" I asked, trying not to sound too surprised. "Yeah, exactly, a date. I like you, Emma. And I think we could be good together," he said, looking me straight in the eyes. I took a moment, considering. Mark was great. We got along, shared a lot of laughs, and he had already seen me at my worst, surviving on coffee and zero sleep. Plus, I was definitely interested. "Okay, yeah. Let's try a date," I smiled, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. "Great. It's a date then. How about this Friday? Dinner at that Italian place you said you loved?" he suggested with a hopeful look. "It's a plan. It's a date," I confirmed, and we both grinned, a little relieved. From that day on, things changed between us, but in a good way. We still worked together, still had our coffee runs, but now there was an added layer to our relationship, something that felt both thrilling and terrifying. 2 years slipped by quicker than I'd ever imagined. Mark and I got married, settling into a rhythm of life together that felt as natural as breathing. We were happy, genuinely so, but it wasn't all smooth sailing. I talked to my mom on the phone often, but only made it back home for the holidays. Each call, I noticed something was a bit off. Mom seemed more forgetful, her thoughts a bit scattered. It worried me. I even brought up the idea of her moving in with us, or considering a nursing home, but she was adamant. "No, Emma, I'm fine on my own. Don't fuss over me," she'd say stubbornly, brushing off my concerns. As for my new in-laws, our relationship remained cool, distant even. They never really warmed up to me, treating me with a polite indifference that was hard to crack. At family gatherings, I often felt more like an outsider than a daughter-in-law. It was uncomfortable, but Mark was a solid presence by my side, always quick to divert the conversation or lighten the mood. Life had settled into a comfortable routine, Mark and I juggling work and home, while my worries about Mom's health simmered on the back burner. Then, Helen, my mother-in-law, started becoming more involved in our lives, and not in a way I appreciated. It started innocently enough, a phone call here and there, asking if we could pick up some groceries for her since we were already out shopping. "Hey Emma, could you grab me some of that bread I like? Oh, and maybe some of that fancy cheese you got last time? I'll pay you back, promise," she'd say, her voice always upbeat, but somehow it felt forced. "Sure, Helen. No problem," I'd reply, trying to keep the peace and make an effort. But the grocery lists grew longer, and the promises to pay back soon just stopped coming. One day, after I came home tired from a long day at work, I found Mark in the kitchen, sorting through a pile of receipts. "What's all this?" I asked, dropping my keys on the counter. "It's from my mom," Mark said, not looking up. "Your mom? What do you mean?" I frowned, picking up a receipt. It was for a dinner at a high-end restaurant, a dinner I didn't attend. "She's been asking me to pay for a lot of stuff." "She asked you too, hasn't she?" Mark asked, rubbing his temples. "Yes, she has," I admitted, feeling a knot in my stomach. "I thought it was just now and then. How bad is it?" Mark spread the receipts on the counter, showing dinners, groceries, and even some clothes. "It's adding up, Emma. This isn't just a few favors. It's becoming a regular thing." The next day, I decided to confront Helen about it. I called her, trying to keep my voice calm. "Helen, we need to talk about the money," I began. "It's getting a bit out of hand." "Oh, Emma, I thought you didn't mind. Your family, after all." Helen's voice was light, but there was a sharpness to it that I hadn't noticed before. "I don't mind helping, Helen, but this is more than helping. It's like we're your personal ATM," I said, the words harsher than I intended. There was a pause, and then Helen laughed, a short, humorless sound. Well, I didn't realize you were keeping tabs. I'll make sure not to bother you anymore. The call ended abruptly, leaving me staring at my phone in confusion. That night, I told Mark about the conversation. He was quiet for a long time, then he took my hand. I'm sorry, Emma. I should have noticed sooner. I'll talk to her. After the money talk with Helen, things between us and Mark's parents turned frosty. They stopped asking for money, but the damage to our relationship was done. It was like walking on eggshells whenever we met, each conversation strained and filled with polite, hollow words. It was during my birthday dinner when the tension truly surfaced. We had invited both sets of parents to celebrate, hoping to smooth things over with a nice meal at our place. Mark's parents arrived last, and right off the bat, things felt off. Helen and Frank walked in without a gift, which wasn't a big deal to me, but the way they mentioned it struck a nerve. We didn't bring a present. After all, Mark is the best gift we could have ever given you, Helen said with a tight smile as they entered. I forced a smile, trying to keep the evening light. Well, I'm lucky to have him, I replied, guiding them into the living room where drinks were set up. Throughout dinner, the conversation veered from trivial to tense. Helen was particularly inquisitive that night, her questions sharp and probing. So, Emma, how's your mother doing? Still living in that little house of hers? She asked, stirring her drink casually. Yeah, she's fine, thanks for asking. She loves that place, wouldn't dream of leaving it, I answered, trying not to let on how much her interest bothered me. And her health? Must be tough, getting older without someone to look after her. Helen pressed on, her eyes narrowing slightly. She manages well enough. We talk every day, I said firmly, hoping she'd drop the subject. Frank chimed in then, his tone unusually harsh. Seems risky at her age, being all alone. You sure that's wise? I glanced at Mark, who looked as uncomfortable as I felt. We've discussed other options, but she's quite independent. Thanks for your concern, though, he interjected, trying to steer the conversation elsewhere. The rest of the evening passed with a palpable undercurrent of tension. After the meal, while we were having dessert, Helen continued her interrogation under the guise of casual conversation. Must be hard, balancing a career and worrying about an aging parent, she remarked, looking at me pointedly. It is, but it's nothing I can't handle, I said, my voice colder than I intended. We do what we have to do, right? Of course, dear, Helen replied, her voice dripping with insincerity. Just make sure you're not biting off more than you can chew. The moment they left, the relief was tangible. Mark let out a deep breath, running his hands through his hair. I'm sorry about that. I don't know why they were acting like that, he apologized, looking genuinely upset. It's okay, Mark. It's not your fault, I assured him, though inside, my mind raced with anxiety. Why was Helen so interested in my mom all of a sudden? What was she getting at? The phone rang early on a Saturday morning, slicing through the quiet like a siren in the night. Groggy and a bit annoyed, I fumbled for the phone on the nightstand, knocking over a glass of water in the process. Hello? I mumbled, still half asleep. Emma, honey, you have to come get me. They've taken everything. I don't know what to do. My mom's voice came through, frantic and shaky. I sat up straight, instantly awake. Mom, slow down. What happened? Who took what? It's the house, Emma. The bank, they've sealed it off. I can't get any of my things. They said I owe them money, so much money. I don't understand. Her voice cracked, and I could hear the fear in every word. My heart pounded. Okay, I'm coming. Just stay where you are. Where are you? I'm in the hospital. They brought me here last night. They thought I was having a stroke, but it was just my blood pressure. It shot right up, Emma. I was so scared. I'm getting the next flight out. Mark will come with me. We'll figure this out, I promise. Hanging up, I turned to find Mark already sitting up, concern etching his face. What's going on? He asked. It's my mom. Something terrible has happened. We need to go to her. Now, I said, throwing the covers off and starting to pack a bag with shaking hands. Mark was on his feet in an instant, pulling clothes from drawers without a word. We were a team, and right then, I'd never been more grateful for his support. The flight was a blur of worry and whispered plans. As soon as we landed, we raced to the hospital where my mom was staying. Seeing her in that hospital bed, pale and frightened, was like a punch to the gut. She looked so small, so vulnerable. "Emma, oh thank God," she sobbed as I rushed to her side. "I'm here, Mom. It's going to be okay," I soothed, holding her hand tightly. She clung to me, then looked over at Mark. "Thank you for coming, both of you. I'm so sorry to drag you into this." "It's no trouble, Sophie. We're here to help," Mark reassured her, his voice steady. Once we had calmed her down, I gently prodded for more details. "Mom, tell us exactly what happened. Start from the beginning." Taking a deep breath, she explained. "A few months ago, someone called. They said they were from my bank and that I had an unpaid loan. For your education, they said. It was so much money, Emma. They told me it was $50,000. I didn't know what to do. My stomach twisted. But, Mom, you didn't take out any loan for my education. It was all scholarships and your hard work." "I know, honey, I know that now. But they were so convincing. They knew where you went to school, when you graduated." I got scared. "They said they could help me take out a loan to cover it, so I did. I didn't want to bother you with it." My fists clenched. What happened then? A week later, I got an email. It said I'd won the lottery, $500,000. I thought it was a miracle. I thought I could pay off the loan and still have enough left over to finally retire comfortably. They said I just needed to pay some taxes on it first, $80,000. So, I took out another loan. "Mom, no," I whispered, horror dawning on me. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know, I was a fool. There was no lottery, Emma. It was all a scam. Now the bank has taken everything. I owe more than $150,000, including fines and penalties, and I don't have a penny to my name." Anger surged through me, hot and fierce. "We'll get to the bottom of this, Mom. Whoever did this to you, we'll find them." Mark and I were shell-shocked. The phone calls, the emails, and the cascading deceit, it was all too much. But we were clear on our next step, we needed to report this. We drove to the local police station, the morning air feeling unusually crisp as if it too sensed the turmoil. At the station, we sat down with Detective Martinez, a no-nonsense type who'd seen more scams than she could count. We explained everything, how my mom was duped into believing she owed a huge loan, how she thought she'd won the lottery, and every detail leading up to her financial ruin. Martinez listened, her expression growing tighter with each word. "We'll start by tracing the phone numbers and the email address used in the scam. These guys mess up somewhere, they always do," she said, tapping away at her computer. A few intense days later, Martinez called us in. Her office felt colder than I remembered. "We've made a breakthrough," she announced, her voice grim. "The account where your mom sent the money, it's registered to a familiar name." Mark and I exchanged puzzled glances. "Familiar how?" he asked. "It's registered under your mother's name, Helen," Martinez revealed, her eyes locked on Mark. The room spun. It couldn't be. But then I remembered my birthday dinner, how Helen had prodded about my mom's finances, her health, her house. It made a chilling sense. Mark slammed his fist on the table. "That's impossible. My mother couldn't do this." His voice broke, strained with disbelief and anger. "I'm sorry, Mark. I know this is hard, but we've double-checked. She was behind the calls and the emails," Martinez said softly. The betrayal was palpable. Mark was torn, rage and shock battling within him. "We need to confront her. We need to hear it from her," he said finally, his voice steel. As we arrived at his parents' house, I noticed a shiny new car in the driveway and my stomach turned. They were living it up while my mom was drowning in despair and debt. We knocked and Helen opened the door, all smiles, acting like we were just there for a casual visit. "Mark, Emma, what a surprise. Look at our new car. And next week, we're off on a cruise." Mark's face was like stone. "Cut the crap, Mom. We know about the money. It's over." Helen's smile faltered, her eyes darting between us. "What money, dear? What are you talking about?" Mark stepped into the house, his anger barely contained. "The money you stole from Emma's mom. We know everything." At that, Helen's face drained of color. She staggered back, leaning against the wall. "Mark, please, you have to understand, we needed." "It's too late for excuses," Mark cut her off. His father, Frank, had appeared by then, his expression wary. Frank tried to intervene, his voice shaky. "Mark, we're your parents. We're old, prison would destroy us. Please, think about what you're doing." I couldn't hold back. "Your age didn't stop you from scamming an old woman out of her home and her peace. Why should we consider your age now?" Helen started to sob, her hands trembling. "Please, Mark. I'm your mother. Don't do this to us." Mark looked at them, his eyes cold and distant. "The police are on their way. You did this to yourselves." The conversation was cut short by the sound of sirens. As the police car pulled up, Frank and Helen's demeanor shifted from pleading to resignation. They knew it was over. Officers entered the house, and after a brief exchange, handcuffed Helen and Frank. They cried, begged for forgiveness as they were let out, but Mark and I just shook our heads. Forgiveness was too much to ask. The courtroom was packed on the day of the sentencing. As the judge declared a 2-year sentence for both Helen and Frank, a murmur swept through the crowd. People who had once respected and known my in-laws were visibly shocked by the extent of their deception. It was a surreal moment to watch them being led away, knowing they had to sell their house to make restitution. After the trial, life slowly started to piece itself back together, but the scars remained. My mom had recovered physically, but she was still mentally shaken. The phone ringing would make her jump, a sad reminder of the trauma she endured. I took legal custody to ensure her well-being, which gave both of us some peace of mind. With the money Helen and Frank were forced to pay, I managed to find a beautiful nursing home for Mom. It wasn't just any facility, but a prestigious one right in our neighborhood. I made sure she had the best care and could maintain some independence within a supportive community. The first time we visited her new home, Mom was hesitant, but as she saw the gardens and the lively social rooms, her eyes lit up. "It's lovely, Emma," she said, looking around with a cautious smile. "It's the best, Mom. You deserve it. And look, it's just 5 minutes from our place. I'll be here all the time," I reassured her, squeezing her hand. She nodded, her smile growing more confident. "I like that. Maybe I can get used to answering the phone again here, with all these nice people around." I laughed, relieved to see her finding comfort. "You'll be running the place in no time, Mom." As the days turned into weeks, Mark and I found ourselves settling into a new routine. We were expecting our first child, a beacon of hope after a stormy period. The joy of impending parenthood brought us closer, and I often found myself marveling at how Mark stood by me through everything. His unwavering support was my rock. One quiet evening, as we sat in our living room, Mark wrapped an arm around me. "How's your mom today? Settling in still?" "She's good, getting better at making friends. And she started a little garden project," I replied, resting my head against his shoulder. "That's great. She's strong, like her daughter," he said, kissing the top of my head gently. Our lives had changed irrevocably. There was no more contact with Mark's parents, that bridge was burned for good. Yet, in its ashes, we found the strength to rebuild. We focused on the future, our family, and all the love that remained unshaken by the past.